What's up, everyone? This is Paul Garcia from ProjectSpurs.com, bringing you a quick recap of the San Antonio Spurs' 7-point loss on the road in Portland. So the Spurs played a lot better on Tuesday evening on the second night of a back-to-back. This was a very close game for both teams throughout, and then Portland kind of pulled away there in crunch time. So let's go through a quick recap of this game and then do some analysis of how this game went for the Spurs. So early on in the first 6 minutes, the Spurs are up by 8. They actually led by 12 points. They actually built a double-digit lead. They couldn't hold it, though. Portland fought back. The rookie Shaedon Sharpe came off the bench, really strong for Portland in that opening quarter with 10 points, and so the Blazers led by 1 after the first quarter. Second quarter, very close quarter. First the Spurs are up by 6 midway through the quarter. Then the Blazers go into halftime up by 6. Third quarter, same scenario here, a very close quarter. Portland's up by 8 midway through the third quarter. Then Jakob Poeltl has a really strong game that he's showing there in the third quarter, and Portland still leads by 4. Jakob at this point had 21 points, and then the Spurs were outscoring Portland by 16, which was a theme throughout the night. In the fourth quarter, the Spurs are up by 6 midway through the quarter, and Poeltl in this time frame between that first 6 minutes of this quarter, Poeltl actually broke his career high hit, which was 29 points. He ends up the night over 30 points. But then it was crunch time when the Spurs do struggle. They ended up having a tough time in those last 5 minutes, even though they went into the crunch time with a 6-point lead. Portland outscored them, and Portland held on for the 7-point win. We're going to go into that a little bit closer here in the analysis as we progress through this game. So your leading scorers for this game, as you can see, a new career high for Jakob Poeltl. He was just dominant in the paint, especially in that second half. He ends up with 28 of his 31 points there in the paint. And if you look, he had 28 points alone, and Portland as a team had 46. Devin Vassell had a pretty good 1 through 3 quarters. Is where he really got his scoring going. Really efficient from the he had a good night shooting from the 3-point line, 12 points. He ends up with 21 points in the night. Keldon had a good game scoring the ball, but we're going to talk about him in a little bit here when we get to one of the parts about his turnovers, where he had some crucial turnovers there at the end of the game with 3 turnovers in crunch time. And then Bates-Diop off the bench there with 10 points. Those are your leading scorers for San Antonio. The Spurs were just dominant in the paint, like I mentioned, with 20. They outscored Portland by 20 points. For the Blazers, that they were led by Jeremy Grant, who had 29 points. I believe he scored most of those points in the first 3 quarters. And Anthony Simons was there for Portland on the perimeter with 23 points. Dame, of course, with 22 points. He had a big 3 in crunch time. And then Sharpe had an early first half that was very impressive, but then he was kind of quiet the rest of the night for Portland. And it's notable that the Blazers did win the 3-point line, because that's an area where these Spurs still haven't won a game when they lose the 3-point line. So some standout players for San Antonio. You had Jakob Poeltl. He had a great game here. 31 points on the night, 14 rebounds, 5 assists, 4 turnovers. That's a theme for the Spurs, is that they end up with 19 turnovers as a team, and you do want to talk about those turnovers. Keldon, it was really that crunch time that really, where he really struggled. So he ends up with 20 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, and let's just talk about crunch time. The final 5 minutes, he had 3 of his 4 turnovers. So again, going into crunch time, he only had 1 turnover on the night. Then in crunch time, he really struggled. The ball went off his feet. He just really struggled. He traveled. So Keldon, in crunch time, he really struggled there with 3 of his 4 turnovers in crunch time. Trey Jones came back after that stomach illness where he was out. He didn't score a lot of points, just 2 points, but he did finish with 10 assists for the team and 0 turnovers. So that's what you like to see from Trey. Devin Vassell ends up with 21 points on the night. Also 2 rebounds and 2 assists, but he also had those 4 turnovers. And then you had Bates-Diop off the bench there with 10 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists. So those are some of the standout players for San Antonio in this game. When we look at the shot breakdown between both teams were shot very well in the paint. They both finished well. Spurs made 65% of their paint shots. Portland made 62%. The one good thing for San Antonio is that Portland didn't shoot that many shots in the paint. Just 47% of their attempts came in the paint. The Spurs are starting to have some trouble from the 3-point line. They only made 31% of their threes tonight, and that's kind of been a theme where their accuracy is starting to trend down a little bit in their last few games overall. And then Portland had a great night shooting from 3. They ended up making 47% of their 3-point makes. And then Portland got to outscored San Antonio by 7 points at the free throw line. Both teams in transition, they were kind of even. 12 points for the Spurs, 11 fast break points for Portland. And then both teams really took advantage of each other's turnovers, where they would go on the other end and score with points off turnovers for both teams there. But again, Portland held on for the win in this one with their outside shooting, and then also that free throw gap that they had. All right, so what stood out on offense? Let's talk about the good and the bad for San Antonio in this game. 66 paint points is now a new season high for the Spurs. 65% accuracy in the paint was also a new season high. Again, you want to give a lot of that credit to Jakob Poeltl, who was dominant there in the paint for San Antonio. The Spurs got over 30 assists with 34 assists for the night. This is now their 7th game with 30-plus assists for the season. So again, that ball movement was back with Trey Jones back running the show at the point. He ends up with 10 of those 34 assists. The not so good on offense, again, it's the three-point shooting. They're still struggling there. 27 points from three. So the volume, I mean, the amount that were going in wasn't happening as much. Accuracy was also struggling, 31% from three as a team. The 19 turnovers are critical, and Portland scores 25 points off those turnovers. And then, of course, crunch time, you kind of expect this from a young team with new roles and more responsibility, and that's where the Spurs are struggling. Now, when they get into crunch time, those final 5 minutes, when it's a 5-point game or less, they are having some trouble there, and they moved to 2-4. And again, tonight was all about them, missing their shots at the end. I'm struggling on defense, and then also those turnovers that they inflicted on themselves there in those final 5 minutes. What stood out on defense? The good. Portland only scored 46 paint points, but again, when they did shoot pretty well in the paint. They also had 11 fast break points. The Spurs, so the Spurs kept the transition defense pretty good here against Portland, even though Portland does run more so of a half-court offense for the majority of the game. The Blazers turned it over, a lot, 17 turnovers. So the Spurs' defense was pretty aggressive there. The Spurs scored 31 points off those turnovers by Portland, which is a new season high for the Spurs. And anytime the Blazers turned it over, the Spurs cashed in with 1.82 points per turnovers, which is also a new season high for San Antonio. The not so good for the Spurs is their outside perimeter defense. Of Portland again made 45 points from three, should I say. Portland shoots 47% from 3-point accuracy. And then when they did get in the paint, Portland scored well there. 62% of their shots went in. And then they also got to the free throw line and made their free throws. 20 made free throws for Portland. Up next, the Spurs are off on Wednesday. Then they return. They stay on the road in California now. They're going to Sacramento, where the Kings are 7-6. And then, of course, in the weekend they have that LA trip where they go to the Clippers on Saturday, and then they finish this road trip on Sunday at the Lakers. So for Project Spurs, I am Paul Garcia.